Disney is no longer the magical, wonder-filled universe it was when we were growing up. They aren't just making uninspiring, lackluster new films. They're going back and rewriting old classics, altering the narratives of iconic creations and turning nostalgia into controversy. Meanwhile, they buy out competing studios that are actually creating cinematic masterpieces and drag them into the mud. Audiences have noticed. Disney is losing hundreds of millions at the box office, stock prices have hit record lows, and engagement across their platforms is dropping. And while it might seem like a sign to pivot, the truth is much darker. Disney's golden era, the Renaissance, ran from 1989 to 1999. The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Pocahontas, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan weren't just hits, they defined an entire generation. Critics and fans loved them alike, and box office numbers were astronomical. The Lion King alone earned nearly $1 billion, making it the 57th highest-grossing film of all time. Soundtracks sold millions. The Little Mermaid 6 times platinum, Beauty and the Beast 3 times platinum, Aladdin 3 times platinum, and The Lion King reached diamond status. Pixar entered the scene in the mid-90s with Toy Story, revolutionizing animation with fully computer-generated films. John Lasseter, a former Disney animator, shaped the first Toy Story, taking years to perfect the character's emotional depth. Initially, Disney executives hated his cynical version, but a rewrite showed toys who genuinely loved their owners, and Toy Story became a $373 million worldwide hit, redefining what animated films could achieve. Pixar continued with A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Finding Nemo, and Up, creating not just box office hits, but cultural landmarks. Meanwhile, Disney experimented with live-action TV and acquisitions. The Disney Channel created classics like Even Stevens, Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Hannah Montana, and Wizards of Waverly Place, shows that shaped early 2000s childhoods while teaching lessons on friendship, puberty, and bullying. Movies spun out of these series, like High School Musical, creating a multimedia empire. Disney also owned Touchstone and Hollywood Pictures, producing films like Pretty Woman, Armageddon, Dead Poets Society, Tombstone, and The Sixth Sense, solidifying their 90s dominance. The 2000s brought challenges. Hand-drawn animation faltered against CGI, DreamWorks rose with Shrek and Chicken Run, and Disney's Secret Lab produced only mediocre CGI films. The Emperor's New Groove earned $70 million, far below Renaissance standards. Lilo and Stitch, though beloved, grossed $273 million. It became clear Disney couldn't compete without innovation, so Bob Iger acquired Pixar in 2006 for $7.4 billion. Lasseter maintained creative control, ensuring Pixar retained its quality while Disney leveraged its resources. Pixar films like Ratatouille, Cars, Wall-E, and Up reignited Disney's animation prestige. Marvel was the next breakthrough. Disney bought the studio in 2009 for $4.4 billion. Kevin Feige's vision for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, an interconnected world culminating in Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, made Disney a global powerhouse. Black Panther became a cultural phenomenon, celebrating African identity through Wakanda's design and aesthetics. Avengers Endgame grossed $2.7 billion, marking Disney's dominance in live-action franchises. Star Wars followed a similar pattern. Disney purchased Lucasfilm in 2012 for $4 billion, producing The Force Awakens, Rogue One, and Solo. While financially successful, these films polarized fans. Original fans criticized Disney for rewriting George Lucas's vision, allowing multiple directors like J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson to redefine character arcs, creating inconsistent storytelling. While the new films brought in billions, the fanbase's trust eroded, a warning Disney would ignore. By the late 2000s, problems emerged. Lasseter faced sexual misconduct allegations in 2017 and left Pixar, leaving the studio creatively adrift. Pixar flops Onward, Luca, Soul had varying success, while Lightyear and Strange World were critically divisive and commercially underwhelming. Many claim these films prioritized political messaging over story, though the LGBTQ community celebrated unprecedented representation. Disney's approach was not just about inclusion, it was increasingly influenced by corporate equality index pressures, where scoring 100 by the Human Rights Campaign became tied to investment appeal, marketing, and social credibility. In short, financial incentives were now intertwined with activism. Meanwhile, Disney live-action remakes exploded, with Cinderella, The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, Dumbo, and Aladdin all profitable. But recent remakes flopped. Mulan, Cruella, Pinocchio, and Peter Pan failed to capture audiences. The 2023 Little Mermaid remake, casting Halle Bailey as Ariel, sparked debates about racial reinterpretation. Disney defended diversity, but fans were divided, showing that modernizing classics is a risky venture. Pixar, Disney Animation, Marvel, and Star Wars all began to show visible cracks as the 2020s unfolded. What once felt like an unstoppable creative empire slowly turned into a brand struggling to justify its own scale. Marvel films like Eternals, Morbius, and The New Mutants collapsed at the box office, despite production and marketing budgets that reportedly crossed $200 million. These weren't small experiments. They were supposed to be pillars of the franchise. Instead, they became warning signs. The problem wasn't just money. These films felt disconnected and strangely empty. Audiences didn't hate Marvel overnight, they simply stopped caring. And in entertainment, indifference is far more dangerous than criticism. At the same time, Disney aggressively pushed into streaming. Disney Plus shows reportedly cost upwards of $20 to $25 million per episode, rivaling or even surpassing blockbuster movie budgets. On paper, this should have guaranteed prestige television. In reality, many of these shows failed to create lasting cultural impact. They trended for a weekend, generated debates online, and then vanished from conversation entirely. In 2023, Bob Iger announced a $5.5 billion cost-cutting plan, including the layoff of around 7,000 employees. This wasn't a creative reset, it was a financial emergency brake. For a company of Disney's size, that kind of move doesn't signal confidence, it screams caution. It was an admission that the growth strategy had overextended itself. Disney has always been a business first. That part isn't new. From the very beginning, Walt Disney understood merchandising, licensing, and scale. But what was different in the past was the order of priorities. Creativity used to lead, business followed. Today, that order appears reversed. Acquisitions like Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and 20th Century Fox weren't just about storytelling. They were about control. Control of IP, control of market share, control of competition. Remakes, live-action reboots, and franchise extensions became the safest possible investments. Why risk new ideas when nostalgia already has a proven ROI? Alongside this, Disney aligned itself strongly with modern corporate social frameworks, diversity initiatives, inclusion metrics, and public political positioning. To many viewers, this looks like ideology. To investors, it's risk management. Maintaining a high corporate equality index score helps appease institutional investors, ESG funds, and large financial backers. In short, billions of dollars are tied to compliance, perception, and alignment. And that doesn't automatically make these efforts insincere, but it does make them strategic. The issue arises when storytelling becomes secondary to messaging, when characters feel like symbols instead of people, when narratives prioritize checklists over coherence. Audiences can sense this instantly, and over time, fatigue sets in. Endless sequels, spin-offs, multiverses, and interconnected timelines demand emotional investment without delivering emotional payoff. Viewers aren't rejecting diversity, they're rejecting laziness. They're rejecting recycled plots, inconsistent character arcs, and stories that feel designed by committee rather than passion. Contrast this with Disney's creative peaks. The Renaissance era of the 1990s. The early Pixar films like Toy Story, Finding Nemo, and Up. Phase 1 and 2 of the MCU, where characters were allowed to grow slowly, flaws were embraced, and stories had room to breathe. These weren't perfect films, but they had vision. They trusted the audience. Back then, innovation wasn't an afterthought. It was the selling point. Today, Disney exists as a corporate giant juggling social mandates, investor expectations, streaming algorithms, and brand protection. Creativity still exists within the company, but it's buried under layers of strategy, approvals, and risk aversion. The magic isn't completely gone, it's just diluted. To reclaim its former glory, Disney doesn't need more money, more IP, or more acquisitions. It already has all of that. What it needs is restraint. Fewer remakes, fewer rushed releases, fewer projects designed purely to fill a content calendar. Disney must return to stories that inspire first. Stories that stand on their own without nostalgia or controversy doing the heavy lifting. Stories that respect legacy audiences without being trapped by them. Stories that feel human again. Whether Disney can strike that balance remains uncertain. The company stands at a crossroads: continue optimizing for corporate metrics, or rediscover the creative soul that once made it untouchable. The future of Disney won't be decided by budgets or branding, but by whether it remembers why people fell in love with it in the first place.